Good evening, this is Perrysburg City Council for December 15, 2020. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Here.
Mr. Coolman.
Here.
Ms. Materney.
Here.
Mr. Matuzak.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy. Here. Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Here. Thank you. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand if you are able. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The minutes of the council meeting for December 1st, 2020.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have the minutes, and I believe everyone has received a copy of these. Hearing no questions on the minutes, I would like to make the motion to approve the minutes of the City Council meeting held on December 1st, 2020, as written, and to dispense with their readings.
Second. Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have no special reports, letters, communications, citizen concerns. Seeing none, administrative reports. First, I just quickly want to say John Eccles retiring at the end of the year, and we want to give him a particular acknowledgement and recognition for all his hard work and service to the community. We have some more formal things going on, but John cannot be here tonight, but I did want to make sure that he gets special recognition today. I also want to, on behalf of myself, Perrysburg City Council, and the entire community, I want to wish our condolences, thoughts, and prayers for the family of Nicholas Leonidas, the Bowling Green City Council member who was tragically killed in an automobile accident last week. He's a real asset to the community and a very nice person, did a lot for Bowling Green and for all of Wood County. So we want to wish his family the best and show our support for them during this difficult time. I have no other reports other than I have two recommendations to city committees: Becky Williams to the Planning Commission and Susan Rowland Miller to the Street Tree Commission, that for the council when it gets to the President of Council report. Administrator, do we have?
No report, Your Honor.
Finance Director?
No report tonight.
Director of Law?
No report.
Thank you very much. That ends administration reports. President of Council.
Thank you, Mayor. For my report here today, I know you just mentioned the appointments of Becky Williams and Susan Rowland Miller to the Planning Commission and Street Tree Commission. I would like to make a motion to approve those appointments as the Appointment Review Committee has met and recommended 3-0.
Second. Discussion? Roll call?
Alrighty, Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Yes.
Thank you.
And one other thing I'd like to do is recognize our fire department staff. There was a fire over in Aspen Drive last week, and the individual who owns that home works with my wife, and she had nothing but great things to say about the staff throughout that horrible ordeal that her family went through. She said the staff is very professional and did a wonderful job. So I just would like to thank our fire department staff for how well that they handled such an awful situation for our residents. That would be the end of my report.
And Jonathan, we want to talk about that interview to the new council position. It occurred to me that...
I appreciate you reminding me of that. I completely forgot about that. I know Mr. McCarthy had reached out that he had some concerns with the meeting nights of January 20th, as that would be the date scheduled for the presidential inauguration. I'm not sure what time the inauguration would take place. I don't know if that's something that will be a hindrance. Is there any conversation that the council would like to take on possibly changing that date? And I'll leave the floor open to anybody with any suggestions on that.
And do you guys want to do it virtually?
I think that we would still probably try to do those in person if we can, depending on what we get.
That's fine.
Yeah, I prefer move to a different date. The inauguration will be at noon, I think by law, custom, that's what it is. But there will be a lot happening that day, and I think if we can find another day, I'd recommend it.
Pulling up my calendar right now. Is there any thoughts on any dates that could potentially work? I know we have this, looking at Mary Jo, who seems to know the schedule.
She's a master of days.
Let's see here. So we said,
Are we still looking at that week, whether that be Monday or
Monday's a holiday. Monday,
The 18th 's a holiday.
and the
the
21st,
21st would be open.
the Thursday?
I know that that would be a difficult day to do. Would it, let's see here. I have to look at a couple different schedules myself. I may be able to make that work, but I would ask if we could start a little earlier.
I honestly have no issue with any date, but do we really think the presidential inauguration is going to affect the ability of anybody
Yeah, I
to be
think
here?
people will be interested who worked during the day and watching that night what has happened and what the developments were. Maybe they want to watch the new inaugural address or whatever.
I mean, if we move to the 21st, I don't have an issue. I would just ask if we do it at 5:30. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with the Councilman Poolman. I'm not sure how much it would be an impact for us here in Perrysburg, but I do understand and want to respect those who would like to watch that and be potentially partake in that event.
I would be available at 5:30 on the 21st, if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
That's good for
Could we
me.
possibly do the week of January 27th?
It would be, we have 45 days to make that
What about
appointment.
on Monday or Tuesday? 27th or the 28th?
Well, I know I can't do the 28th.
Is there a reason we don't want to do it the 19th? I know we have a council meeting, but
That'll take quite a bit of time. If we did it on the 19th, just depending on how many people we have that submit to it.
I'd rather kill one night than two, to be honest.
I'm in agreement with President Smith. I think we should have a different night because it will take some time to listen to what they have to say.
I think the last one took about 2 hours, if I remember correctly. And I understand the concern, Mr. Pullman.
Does the 21st not work? Is that what we're thinking?
That's fine with me.
I think we never had a problem.
Is there, Councilwoman Warren, is there an issue with the 21st if we push that to 5:30 on the 21st, or?
Well, it's not the great of a day for me. I've got a lot going on that day. Is there another date that we want to do, the 25th or?
25th, 26th, 27th.
You could push it back to the 25th, but we have to be conscious that we have a short window. I know the mayor wouldn't mind if we went outside that window, but not want to put words in his mouth, but
Whatever you guys want to do.
President Smith, isn't the 25th a Saturday?
25th is a Monday.
25th would work for me.
I think
We
the
still do it
25th would be
early.
good.
Still do it earlier though?
We could start it earlier if we could start at 5:30 on the 25th.
Are we talking about the same day as the council meeting?
No.
Because council meeting is the first and the third.
Yeah, the council meeting would be on the 19th and the 5th.
Okay, and then I'm going to look to Barry. When is our safety committee meeting?
The 26th,
Okay.
Tuesday.
Do we have any conflicts?
Here's the
So why don't we tentatively change the date to January 25th at 5:30 p.m. Here in the council chambers for that appointment process, and hopefully we can get that communicated to the public of the new date and time. And out of curiosity, how many individuals have put in so far for it? We don't need names, just out of curiosity.
The last I knew at the end of last week, I want to say there was 6.
Okay.
And I just emailed our PIO to see if she can give me an update while council's still in session.
Thank you. Is there anything else to bring up this morning? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, committee reports. Finance and Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Bracken. We didn't meet since last council meeting. We met on December 8th. And the other 5:30. Present were Ms. Warren, myself, and Mr. McCarthy. Also present were Ms. Sandretto, Mr. Krebs, Ms. Rathman, Mr. Ronder, and Mr. Ronder. The first thing we looked at was health insurance. We received some legislation the city that on health insurance for the employees, and there's actually been a recommendation that we switch who we're currently with. And the committee, you'll see my report, you can read the details, but the committee did agree 3-0 to forward that to City Council to approve it, hopefully. Next up is the CARES Act. Ms. Andretto presented that, and we've been offered yet more money under the CARES Act, about $110,000. And the committee agreed 3-0 to recommend that we move that forward to council for approval. We have some legislation for that tonight. The Finance Director's report, we looked at our expenditures over $5,000, addressed any questions we had there. We looked at the balance of the Health and Welfare Fund. What we were given shows about $100,000, but Mr. Krebs did tell us that due to timing, there could have been another $50,000 worth of claims that could have been posted to that. So it's really, this practical matter, about $50,000, which is where we thought it was going to be. So there are no surprises anyway. That too is kind of addressed in conjunction with the new health insurance. We also have the three pieces of legislation that we have every year, this last meeting of the year, that addresses the budget to make any year-end adjustments that need to be made based on year-to-date actual numbers versus what we had in the budget all year long. There are no surprises there. Tax Commissioner's report. Mr. Bonner reported on the income tax collections year-to-date. And he's hoping to finish the year at 19.5 to 20 million, which is a little bit behind last year, because last year we had $21 million in collections, so a possible $1 to $1.5 million shortfall there. I think we talked briefly about the spending this year too, and the administration has curbed the spending substantially, so the $1.5 million did not pose a problem. And then other business, I briefly questioned, I didn't really question, but I felt compelled at least bring up the subject regarding an internal control structure for the city of Sharpsburg due to what took place over in this county recently. And Bruce addressed that, and I'm sure it's everyone in good hands. This was no surprises there either. So that's what took place at the meeting. And I do have, one, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 pieces of legislation. At a minimum, I would ask that ordinances 34, 35, and 36, I'd be able to present those together because they're all kind of tied in one another. 33 is the health insurance, if you'd like to do that separately. And 32 is the amendment for the CARES Act. Anybody have any reason to not do them all together? Hearing none, I'm going to introduce everything together then. Because I believe everything is an emergency. Yep. Okay. So I would like to introduce ordinances 32, 2020, 33, 2020, 34, 2020, 35, 2020, and 36, 2020, and move that the rules be suspended to allow for the reading by number and title only, and dispense with the second and the third readings. Second.
Okay,
Yes.
moving forward.
Roll call. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Goulman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 32, 2020, amending ordinance number 3, 2020 to amend appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures for the year beginning January 1, 2020 and ending December 31, 2020 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance number 33, 2020, authorizing city health insurance coverage and administration agreements through United Healthcare Benefits Administrators and related entities and declaring an emergency. Ordinance number 34, 2020, amending the city budget ordinance to revise the estimated revenues for the year ending December 31, 2020 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance number 35, 2020, amending the city budget ordinance by authorizing certain additions to appropriations for the year ending December 31, 2020 and declaring an emergency. And ordinance number 36, 2020, authorizing certain cash transfers within the city's budgets and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. I move that ordinances 32, 33, 34, 35, and 36, 2020 all be passed as emergency measures.
Second?
Discussion?
I do have one quick question here on the health insurance. I know that we set up that clinic, the group clinic. How is this going to affect it? I believe, did we set that up specifically with Front Path, or is that?
Right, and we will be able to continue with the clinic even though we will be moving our main body of the health insurance over to United Healthcare.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that, because I know that there's some significant cost savings in the long run. of that.
Right, right, but that's a separate agreement on itself.
Okay, perfect. I just want to double check on that. Thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Any other discussion? Roll call?
Okay, Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor Mackin, that is all for me.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Jim, and we want to wish you well in your new job, and we want to thank you on behalf of the city of Perrysburg and all the council members for your service and hard work on behalf of the community. I appreciate that.
Can I piggyback on that very quick? The other thing that's
Just jump on it,
should
Tim.
observe is, Jim, I've been in finance with you for 4 years now, maybe longer. That if you attend any of those meetings, you can really rest assured your money's in good control. His leadership and Dave, and then Bridget backstops both of them. So
Yeah.
he's excelled in a lot of areas, but we'll really miss him in that area where he did an exemplary job of really keeping out an eye for the city's money. And his focus was almost always on the taxpayer.
Almost.
I boy, that although I asked a lot of questions, Bridget always had the right answers. So we're in good shape whether I ask them or not. She's doing
We'll see.
And Mr. Krebs as well.
Good. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Moving on, Service Committee.
Service Committee met December 10th. The first item of business we talked about was appointment to the Tree Commission. We recommended that Susan Rowland Miller be approved. We discussed fall tree planting and legislation, piece of legislation entering a contract with North Branch Nursery for the 2020 fall planting. We discussed erosion control at Free Pond Meadow Park and what it would take to stabilize the bank. Fire station 38 improvements. Right now, the way it is in the old fire station, the new fire station is set up where you have zones for decontamination, that type. The old one does not have that, so this would improve that. Place for the separated. And that piece of legislation actually has to do with, I believe, the consultant fees. Am I right?
For the, yes, for the new fire station, the design fees.
Yeah. And we talked about the State Route 25 and West South Boundary intersection approval, and entering into contract with Tetra Tech for the construction and engineering administration of that, and the RPR service for State Route 25 and West South boundary inspection, intersection improvements. And for those of you who don't know this, TMACOG funding is involved in this. And Tetra Tech was chosen from the list of qualified engineering firms. All those will be coming as legislation in a few minutes. And then the other business was Mr. Smith stated he was going to be attending a Transportation Improvement District meeting scheduled for the following day and then report back to the committee. Our next meeting is Wednesday, January 27th, 2021 at 5:30. Okay. First piece of legislation, and I'm not going to bundle them because they're all kind of different in and of themselves. So, the first piece of legislation I would like to introduce is Resolution 60-2020. I move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only, and to dispense with the second, third readings. And
Second?
Wait a second.
A roll call?
I don't know if you don't.
I forgot it's supposed to be, do I do the emergency? I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second, so roll call on introduction. Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Okay, resolution number 60, 2020, a resolution authorizing an agreement with North Branch Nursery Incorporated not to exceed $65,091 for the 2020 fall tree planting and declaring an emergency.
I move that Resolution 60-2020 be passed as an emergency measure.
I have discussion.
We need a second.
Second.
Discussion.
Yeah, yes, I have discussion. When I was looking through this, looking through the packet, I was wondering, I see where we have North Branch Nursery, and then it says that there were two attached to this legislation. I only saw one, which was North Branch for the bids. And the next question I have is, why is this an emergency to plant trees when it says it's for fall of 2020, and we're in December of 2020? This is winter.
Okay, there is a second bid that was submitted that was significantly higher that we provided to the committee, but did not include in this in an effort to save some paper. And the reason that we need to declare it as an emergency is there is a short window when you can plant trees. And we are in that window right now. What we call fall tree planting is really kind of winter tree planting. And so if it's not declared as an emergency and we can't do it for 30 days, we won't be able to plant. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Roll call?
Okay, Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
I'd like to introduce the Resolution 61-2020 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and dispense with the second, third reading.
Second.
Roll call?
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Resolution number 61, 2020, a resolution authorizing an agreement with G6 Infrastructure LLC not to exceed $74,960 for bank stabilization and erosion control at Three Meadows Large Pond. Oh, sorry.
I move that Resolution 61-2020 be passed.
Second.
I have a question.
Okay, do I?
Why is ODOT doing this work for the pond?
Why are they not?
Why is ODOT doing the work for the pond?
I'm sorry, Bridget. You want this one?
The firm that will be completing the work is G6 Infrastructure. What you see in your materials is references to ODOT specifications that we are following to complete the work. ODOT will not be performing this work or have any hand in the work.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to introduce Resolution 62-2020 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and to dispense with the second, third reading.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Resolution number 62, 2020, a resolution authorizing an agreement with Munger and Munger Associates Incorporated not to exceed 12% of the total cost of construction for construction documents for fire station renovations at Fire Station number 38, located at 140 West Indiana Avenue, and declaring an emergency.
I move that Resolution 62-2020 be passed as an emergency measure.
Second.
Discussion.
Yes, I have a question. Who are the reviewers here? It mentions there were reviewers, and I'd like to be interested to see a bid from Bergman, because I didn't see that listed, simply because I didn't see it listed on some under and under.
Yes, we certainly have a copy of the Bergman proposal, and that can be provided to council. The reviewers included our service director, it included our utilities deputy director, our planning and zoning director, and Mr. Epple.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Roll call.
Okay, Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would like to introduce Resolution 63-2020 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and to dispense with the second, third readings.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Resolution number 63, 2020, authorizing an agreement with Tetra Tech for construction engineering and administration and RPR services for the State Route 25 and west-south boundary intersection improvement, ODOT PID number 104496, ODOT project name, we're not even going to say it, in an amount not to exceed $49,900.
I move that Resolution 63-2020 be passed.
Second.
Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I have a question on this one. Where are the bids? I didn't see any bids listed. I just saw Tetra Tech. And who are the pre-qualified, as it's mentioned, engineering list?
We have a list of pre-qualified engineers and other qualified individuals depending upon what the project is. And anything that is under $50,000 by law, we are permitted to pick from that list any individual, any business that we believe is appropriate for the construction project. So in this case, this was under $50,000. They were on the pre-qualified list, so we chose Tetra Tech.
Okay, I'd like to see the list of them, possibly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's there's multiple categories for which people submit to us their qualifications. So when you see it, you'll see that some businesses qualify for 2 or 3 things, some qualify for 4 things, some qualify for 1.
But I could include that in my email to council along with the Bergman proposal.
Isn't that an ODOT maintained list?
That is not.
Okay.
So if you are using ODOT funds for the actual design, you have to use their pre-qualified firms. We, every 2 years, go out and solicit qualifications in a variety of topics, whether it be architecture, landscape, roadway, water, sewer, wastewater, stormwater, and we pre-qualify our own list for services that are less than $50,000.
Do we use that, do we, you know, what's the ODOT list for that?
The ODOT list, I have looked at it on site, on their website, and it's not specific to Wood County. It includes
Yeah,
all
that's
districts,
true.
so it's very hard to slice and dice. If we were using ODOT grant funding for this project, we would have had to go through their process of selection to select off their pre-qualified list.
The reason why I was asking is because I was going to point out that that's, anybody, the public has access to that list, you know, if you want to look it up yourself. That's what I was trying to get at. In the
Any other-
roundabout way.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yeah.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Was that the end of your report?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the next meeting is January 2021.
Great.
I said it earlier.
Yeah,
Hopefully
thank you.
number 25.
Safety Committee?
Thank you, Your Honor. The Safety Committee has not met, and we have canceled the December meeting for lack of legislation, so our next committee meeting will be Tuesday, January 26th at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
That would be conclude my report.
Recreation Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no report, but I would like to say there was communication regarding an email among the Pratt Group and Mr. Todd France that went out in the last couple of days regarding a crosswalk between Rivercrest Park and Rotary Park, and I think it's a nice idea to be considered, and it sounds like there might be a possibility of that, so thanks in advance if that does happen. Thank you. Oh, and our next meeting will be the second Tuesday in January.
All right, thank you. Planning and Zoning Committee?
No report, Your Honor. We meet on January 13, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. I do have the keeping of hens ordinances, so I'll go ahead and introduce ordinances 23 and 24, 2020. And move that the rules be suspended for allow for the reading by number and title only.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 23, 2020, amending codified ordinance section 1215.02, section 180 of the City of Perrysburg zoning code to allow for keeping of hens within the City of Perrysburg. Sorry, Tim, did you introduce 24 also? Okay, thank you. Moving on, ordinance 24, 2020, amending codified ordinance section 1225.08 of the City of Perrysburg zoning code to allow for the keeping of hens within the City of Perrysburg.
Then I would like to move that ordinances 23 and 24, 2020 be passed.
Second.
Discussion?
I do have one question. No. Sorry, Councilwoman Bourne. Sure. I know that in the previous legislation, the way it's currently listed in the code, it is permitted in agriculture and a special approval use in R1. Is there a reason to not have it be a special approval use in all the other districts? And I'm going to follow that up with another question with, we've had some residents come out and express some concerns about their neighbors bringing this onto the lot. I know that the committee had some long discussions on this. Just kind of curious to what the final resolution was to that and how the Planning and Zoning Department will receive notice of someone who is raising hens in their backyard.
Well, as far as enforcement, it'd be like any other zoning issue, I suppose. If someone felt a neighbor or anyone was keeping hens in a manner that's inconsistent with the ordinance, they'd call the Planning and Zoning Department and they'd go check into it. And the reason we felt comfortable line in those zoning districts is that there is a minimum lot size of 10,890 square feet. So we felt if you've got that big a lot, you can have no more than 6 hens, and you've got the coops and runs are all, dimensions are established. We felt that it could adequately exist, and if there was a problem that the code wasn't being followed, then we'd enforce it like any other zoning issue. And we noted we haven't had much in the way of any negative experience with the Pantocrator when we've been through, and I think even at the committee we talked about the fact that, lessons learned, it's a new adventure. If something, happens where we see it's a problem, then, it's the type of legislation you may need to go back and revisit. If you, so you encounter something that's unexpected. But
I agree there hasn't been any issues with the grandfathering portion. That's one of the reasons we went to that step, to see if there was going to be problems about going to this step we're at now. And I guess the question I have is, I know some of our districts are not necessarily up to the code with the actual lot size itself. Are all the, was it R3 is the smallest one at 10,000? Are all the lots in the R3 district that specific size, or is this going to be?
it has to meet that minimum lot size.
It crosses over, and that's not an arbitrary lot size. So that's designed to be the original lot sizes of the original plat, which is roughly 1/4 of an acre lot. It also allows for the setbacks to occur that we discussed. And I know the gentleman that spoke against allowing hens, his name's slipping me, and I'm not going to take the time to look it up tonight, but I believe he was R3 or R4 and would not have qualified to, his neighbors wouldn't qualify for hens. And certainly this ordinance limits the number of hens that he had previously experienced. I think he said 20-some hens at a neighbor's house. This limits it to 6. So we tried to be cognizant of those concerns and address it with this ordinance.
And I recall the previous ordinance as well, that there was to be a review of the coops. Is that not going to be the case in this one, or by the planning and zoning department? Am I just overthinking it?
No, I mean, it's not a licensed activity anymore, so it would be an enforcement issue like any other. But no, I mean, we didn't have a mechanism, and I don't think the administration probably has the manpower, to go out and inspect, annually inspect to make sure it's not too large. But again, if you ever had an issue, I assume our folks could pretty easily visually observe without even entering the property to see if it looked like there was a size issue.
I know there's a lot of conversation. I'm thinking back to being actively involved with this about 3 years ago, give or take a year. And for some reason, I recall that there was some licensure requirement for that, or is that not? So you're saying that's no longer the case at this point?
That would no longer be the case. Yeah. That was on the interim step, Jonathan, where in the interim period, if you had a hen, you were grandfathered to keep the existing hen. And you had to, we chipped them, right? We had them chipped. And, you had to have a license and pay a fee every year, and that would no longer be.
So there's no more fee or anything else associated with it?
No.
I would like to add that I think that it's great about for sustainability, and you talk about a progressive community, which I think we are trying to be. And this is a step forward toward that.
Any other discussion?
No, but I'll say that I was one of the people initially who had some apprehensiveness to this when this first passed the first time. It's kind of one of the reasons that brought the questions I asked today. But I will say that I think that we have not seen any major issues here with the last couple of years, and so I think this is the right next step.
I'd like to just make a quick comment. You can almost say that those areas where it's zoned will be harking back to the historic roots of the development of that size of the lots, because they were started out as a gentleman farming lot in Perrysburg, quote unquote, according to the article.
I know we took a lot of time on this at committee, and we heard the concerns, and this was here first, so I think I'd be remiss not to say thanks to Mark Weber, who really got the ball rolling on this in this update, so before we vote on it, I wanted to say that.
I'd also like to thank Krista Kiesling, who fought that for, I forget how many days she talked about it. I attended the meetings. Was it 400 and some days or something?
It was
like
1
that?
year. Yes, it was.
Okay, I'd like to thank Krista Kiesling, because I know she was the generator and the leader, so.
Any other discussion? If not, roll call.
Okay, roll call. Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Public utilities?
How about personnel?
Oh, sorry.
I mean, if you just want to skip back.
Usually skip public utilities. Personnel?
We have not met, and I do believe we are going to cancel our meeting that's scheduled for the 22nd, and move that date. So if I can talk to my fellow committee members, I know we want to consider the engineer position again at a committee level and hopefully present to council on the 5th. Is that my understanding, Kate and Bridget?
We talked about moving this personnel committee meeting to early January to then go before council in January.
On the 19th.
On the 19th is what we're shooting for. So if I could get a date in January, because our,
You have Wednesday the 6th, Thursday the 7th, Monday the 4th are all available. Tuesday the 5th is city council.
any of those dates work? Tim, I think it's just Tim and I at this point, right?
No. 6th and 7th are fine.
Those are after council, though.
Yeah, we're just trying to meet before the 19th.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
I didn't hear the dates right. 6th and 7th are Wednesday and a Thursday.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
4th, 6th, and 7th, so Monday, Wednesday, Thursday.
That's fine.
Which would you prefer? Yeah, all the way for me.
Thursday is good.
Thursday the 7th, so we'll meet at Thursday the 7th at 5:30.
Okay.
And I have no other update, but I do have a piece of legislation. So I would like to introduce for a second reading ordinance 25/2020 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Ordinance number 25, 2020, an ordinance amending the city's administrative code, Title 4, Chapter 20, by adding Rule 8 to subsection 220.05, creating a code of conduct for city council.
And nothing further.
Thank you. Public utilities.
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate being moved up unexpectedly in the meeting and to the end again.
I forget you complain.
So with that being said, we did have a Public Utilities Committee meeting on December 10th. It was called to order at 6 p.m. by Chairman Jonathan Smith. The new members present were Jane Attorney, Jonathan Smith, and Barry Van Huzen. Also present were Bridget Cabot, City Administrator, Kate Sandretto, Law Director, Alice Gotzi, Director of Public Utilities, and Matt Schoma, Deputy Director of Public Utilities. The first item on the agenda was tabled as there's still some information being gathered. We had another conversation regarding the sewer credit tabulation for year to date, which the utility structure has the ability to improve as well. And the total credit granted was $7,264.66 during 2020. Next item was the authorized purchase of the sewer system telemetry equipment. You may notice after this discussion that this item is not on the agenda. It has been temporarily tabled as some information came up that they want to look into a little bit more deeply. On this, Ms. Gotzi requested approval of the contract with Mission Communications in the amount of $32,177 for telemetry equipment For the 11th sanitary sewer lift stations, she had explained that this equipment will send an alarm to the on-call person if there is an electrical malfunction or high water issue that needs to be addressed. If these issues are not resolved in a timely manner, it could result in a sewer backup. So Ms. Gassi said that one of the other quotes that was received was in the amount of $160,000. Both Ms. Gassi and Mr. Shoma used this company in previous places of employment and had no issues with them. Ms. Maternity asked if the battery backup for the system, and Ms. Gassi said they have portable generators. The committee agreed 3-0 to recommend approval of the purchase, but that's going to be tabled off until possibly the next council meeting. Legislation regarding section 1060.06B, Rule 65, the non-sufficient fund fee was discussed. Ms. Andretto stated that at a previous meeting, the committee discussed the return check fee. The code language currently reads that the fee is $20 for city customers and $30 for outside city customers. The current amount charged to the city for returned items is $23. Ms. Andretto presented the committee with 2 options. The first would be to repeal the language and handle it with administrative policy. The second option is to amend the language to read that the fee is equivalent to what the city pays the bank. She recommended it not be changed to a certain amount because that amount can vary and change. The committee agreed 3-0 to go with the second option, which is going to put that to amend the language to read the fee is equivalent to what the city pays the bank. And the next item on the agenda is the legislation to revise our homeowner grants. Mr. Smith stated the committee has discussed this grant program that encourages homeowners to remove clean water connections from the sanitary sewer system. Ms. Andretto stated that the current language allows the city to reimburse homeowners 2/3 of the construction cost up to a $6,000 maximum. Because the cost of the construction has increased and to encourage more participation in the program, the administration is recommending the amounts be changed to allow for reimbursements of 80% of the construction cost up to $12,000. Mr. Smith had asked about the fine for the EPA for the overflows that the city would pay. These fines are discretionary, according to Ms. Gassi, and they can be up to $25,000 per day for a violation. Mr. Smith said that he's okay with the change to avoid costs and help with the EPA permit in the future. Mr. Van Hoosen said that he has no problem with the change and he wishes that we could find some way to encourage homeowners to participate. There was some discussion regarding getting the information out, and the administration is looking into better communicating that to our residents. And the committee agreed 3-0 to recommend approval of the increased amount for the homeowner grants program. The next item on the agenda is the Fort Meigs ditch design follow-up. Mr. Smith said that I had sent the design of the ditch to the residents in the area, and that he has not received any comments from them as of this meeting on December 10th. Since this time, I have received a few questions, and I forwarded that over to Ms. Gassi to hopefully help answer. The committee discussed options regarding the sidewalk or multi-use path and what type of a buffer is required on a road with no curbs. Ms. Cabot said that the administration will check with the consultant to see if the buffer requirement is a federal regulation. The committee reviewed the options of no sidewalk, a 5-foot wide sidewalk, and an 8-foot wide multi-use path. Mr. Van Hoosen said it is a heavily used sidewalk and he wondered how not installing a sidewalk is an option. Ms. Cabot said that it would have to be put on the other side of the road. She stated that she believes several properties on the east side of the road go to the edge of the road or to the center of the road. There are other questions about how to put in a sidewalk without affecting the drainage. Mr. Van Hoosen said that it sounds like it would be a major project to put it on the east side of the road, so really the only options are a 5-foot sidewalk or an 8-foot multi-use path. Mr. Smith added that he thinks there are some right-of-way issues on the east side. He noted that when he runs, there's pooling of water issue on the sidewalk north of the ditch, so he believes whenever is decided should be continued down all along Fort Meigs Road. Ms. Maternity stated that she sat in one of the recent land use plan meetings and people want more parks and multi-use paths connecting the city. Mr. Smith agreed that there is a lot of demand for it. Ms. Andretto clarified that the committee wants to know if a 5-foot buffer on an uncurved street is a recommendation or regulation. Mr. Smith said that his recommendation would be an 8-foot multi-use path with a 2-foot buffer be installed depending on the rules with the buffer and how it would impact the west side of the ditch. He said that this can be discussed at the next council meeting, and I believe we'll bring this up for discussion here after we go through our ordinances. And there will be no further business. It adjourned at 6:47 p.m. And with that being said, I do have 2 ordinances to introduce here. If it's okay with everyone, I can put them together, or I can separate them if anybody would like to separate. Not a problem. All right, so first I would like to introduce ordinance 37-2020 and move the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and dispense with the second and third readings.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Ordinance number 37, 2020, amending Rule 65 of the Codified Ordinance Section 1060.06B of the City of Perrysburg Streets, Utilities, and Public Services Code section previously enacted by Ordinance number 46, 2012, and passed on March 6, 2012.
All right, I move that ordinance 37-2020 be passed.
Second.
Discussion.
I just think it's fair. Once we
Roll call.
Okay, Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
and Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I would like to introduce ordinance 38-2020 and move the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and dispense with the second and third reading.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Ordinance number 38, 2020, amending Ordinance 64-2018 and Ordinance 121, 1993, which established a grant program to assist homeowners in removing clean water connections from the sanitary sewer system.
All right, I move that ordinance 38-2020 be passed.
Second.
Discussion.
Throw in one
Yes,
more
sir.
question. Jonathan, the minutes say Alice is here, it's really something she said. They say that a clean, Alice said that a clean water connection to the sanitary sewer is illegal. And resolving these connections is voluntary at this point, but in the future it may become mandatory. I was just confused, if it's illegal, how is it voluntary?
And I know Ms. Gasky probably talked to us a little more. We did have that was mentioned at the end of the committee meeting, but what that meant is that it's very difficult for the city to enforce it anyways. You have to know where these connections are. Right now, with the connections that are, it's basically some pumps are taking the rainwater and pushing right into the sanitary sewer. Where that sits right now is that's contributing to our overflow issues, and we want to try to encourage as much as possible. The big question that I have, and I think that we want to try to encourage it as a voluntary versus mandatory, because I don't know how you'd be able to enforce it mandatory at all.
That explains it. I just got confused. I thought mandatory, and most laws I know of, you gotta follow them. But I hear what you're saying.
The only way you'd be able to do it is to know where the connections are, or to go into someone's home and test it. And
Yeah.
that's a whole other constitutional issue I don't want to go down.
I think what you're doing with the program is a great idea. That's just got confused on that point.
I want to say there's only just a handful of uses of this program this last year. And so that's one of the reasons why we're bringing this here. This conversation we had brought up a couple months ago is to try to increase the utilization so we can encourage a larger use of the grant in order to get rid of these connections. And one of the suggestions that we had was finding ways to get this out to plumbing companies so that way they can be the ones to push this in the areas that we know are more likely to have these type of connections. If you're a business and you know you have a good chance of getting 80% of your pay, you're gonna jump on that.
Right. Just to add, it's been that way for long. I administered this for years, and it was always a trickle. It was 3 or 4 a year, and most of the folks who fall into this category are in the old square or mile block part of the city. So,
I have a question. How has this been publicized?
It's been on our website as well as our social media. Shannon Sullivan put it out on social media.
How about for others that, I'm just thinking of those who may or may not have social media or have a computer. How has it been publicized?
Ms. Stotzi, I don't know if we have it in the messenger journal or if we put it in the actual utility bills.
We have not, but we could do that in the utility bills.
And the next question I have is why are we doubling from 6,000 to 12,000?
to encourage use. We're trying to cover costs because costs have increased since this grant was created. And we're trying to encourage use. And since we have such a limited number of individuals who have taken advantage of it so far, we're hoping that if the amount increases, that will encourage more use.
This is grant money, right? It's grant money that's being used?
No, we are making the grant.
Yeah,
Right.
we're trying to get people to fix it.
It's utilizing the sewer funds.
There's what, 200,000 is it in there?
Something like that, yeah.
Alice is shaking her head, yes. So the $200,000 that is set aside for these grants that are not being utilized. And we'd like to try to do that in hopes that we can reduce even the cost of some of the sewer projects we have to do to make up for that excess water that's coming into the system that shouldn't be.
Yeah, discussion, if not, roll call.
Okay, Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Moran.
I'm gonna say no, because we need to have this read 3 times, and I'm wondering why this is an emergency.
I'm sorry,
See,
Councilwoman Moore, it's not an emergency, we were just waiving the 3 readings. It would go into effect in 30 days, just so you're aware.
Okay.
Done.
so there's no further items for public utilities, and our next scheduled meeting is January 27th at 6:30 p.m. And I think Mr. Matuzak would like to say something about this. Oh, yes, I apologize. I meant to have a discussion on the sidewalk, and I've gotten to all the other discussion, it slipped my mind. So for the Fort Meigs ditch, I apologize. We had a presentation that was made to us. I'm hoping Ms. Gotti can possibly come up here and catch everyone else up on council on this who have not been sitting on the committee. But there was a recommendation that came to us from the group that we had contracted to survey the ditch to look and see what we can do to help with the stabilization of the ditch alongside the road, as well as the sidewalk. If anybody's walked that sidewalk, you can see how it's starting to bow and bend, and there was some issues with the actual size of the slope. A couple of things they came back with was actually increasing, or raising the ditch level to give it a proper slope. And one of the parts of this was regarding the sidewalk on there and what size sidewalk we have to have. So I'm hoping that we can have some information or some discussion on this, and I know it's a really quick synopsis of it, but I'm looking at both Bridget and Alice if you can come up and potentially fill in the rest of the council.
Unfortunately, we've not received any word back from our consultants after we posed a series of questions last week. So we're still waiting on that information. And essentially, and we'll use these carpet squares as a visual, according to the current design drawings, proposed design drawings from CT Consultants, you can have a 8-foot multi-use path, or we think we can have an 8-foot multi-use path with a 5-foot buffer on one side, the street side, the path, and then a 2-foot buffer on the ditch bank side. So what we're trying to figure out is, can we have a 2-foot buffer on the roadside if we have the appropriate barricade, have the pathway, and then have a 2-foot buffer on the ditch side.
The 5-foot buffer on the ditch side.
Was it a
Yeah.
5-foot buffer on the ditch side, Ms. Scott?
I thought that's what I understood.
She's pulling it up. Or conversely, having a 5-foot standard sidewalk, which is our standards today, having the separation. So to put it into perspective, 2-to-1 slope would mean that 2 foot of run for 1 foot, in this case not rise, but drop. So if you had a 2-foot buffer on the ditch bank side, is that a good safety factor, which is essentially the width of one of these carpet squares, will be 2 feet before the top of the ditch bank? Or does it need to be 5 foot? And if it needs to be 5 foot, is that a state regulation, a federal regulation, or is that a suggestion? So we're trying to figure out from the consultants what are hard and fast rules that we have to live by versus their recommendations and suggestions. But Mr. Smith has been advocating for a wider than 5-foot sidewalk. It can't be a 10-foot multi-use path because there's simply not enough room. This could cause additional work on the west side of the bank, which could impact other vegetation. So we're finding out all these answers to understand the pros of having a wider pathway for pedestrians and bicyclists versus any negative impacts that could take place to the homeowners on the opposite side, or just safety factors in and of itself, to make sure that we have a safe walkway, whether it's 5 foot or 8 foot, for our residents and guests.
And I guess still we need to find out the question: what is going to affect are they talking about even having a 5-foot sidewalk affecting that west side of that bank?
Correct.
That's one of the things that we were unclear of as well.
Because there's some corrections to the ditch bank that, if not taking place on the east side, would have to take place on the west side, which then could impact the vegetation over there, as well as we're determining how much right-of-way is on the west side of the ditch bank at these pinch points, we'll call it, to make sure that we don't actually have to go in and request to purchase that right-of-way in order to make these modifications. And we're also determining, is it right-of-way or is it easement? Because a utility easement has very limited abilities to go outside of what that easement purpose was for. If it's an easement and it says it's clearly for maintaining the ditch, then we would not be able to use that property for a multi-use path.
Ms. Cabot, has anybody inquired from the residents who live on Fort Meade Road how they feel about it and what they would like to have?
Mr. Smith has been keeping in contact with many of the residents over in that neighborhood, and in fact has recently received some questions, I think, that he forwarded on to Ms. Gotzi, who is in the process this evening and tomorrow in gathering that information from our consultants.
So we're trying to keep them all in the loop this whole time.
I just think that stretch of land really, and I know I'm in total agreement, I think, with Jonathan on this one. A multi-use path as wide as we can make it and make it safe there just makes a ton of sense. As far as mileage on our multi-use paths, I know it connects quite a few of them.
So sorry to interrupt you, Councilman Gillen, but just to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that, is this path would essentially connect the path that ends over at Fort Meigs, or at least give us to that point where we can connect the multi-use path that ends at Fort Meigs, and then to have that conversation, can we pick it up somewhere in Rivercrest, which will take a path all the way to Falkirk Intermediate.
Yeah, and to, I guess,
Up to down Roach.
Route 25 in
Yeah.
Roachton. So it makes a lot of sense. It adds a lot of mileage to our multi-use paths for people that enjoy those.
Just gotta make sure it works.
Yep.
Rich, you did mention pinch points. Do we have at least a minimum of 15 feet the whole stretch right now?
I will defer to Ms. Scotzi on that because I do believe the consultants referenced a couple points in between. I think it was Echo Junction and I think Sutton Place perhaps, that were narrower than other locations, and also that might be where the ditch was kind of meandering off course because of not necessarily blockage, because of sedimentation buildup. It was taking a new pathway.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, in answer to your question, there are 2 pinch points where a 5-foot sidewalk would be allowable where the sidewalk is now. But this particular, the cross sections they looked at and the pinch points did not address an 8-foot. And those are the questions we've posed since last Thursday. We've posed to the consultant.
And Ms. Scotzi, what was the recommended, well, I'll call it recommended buffers on either side of a sidewalk and or multi-use path?
Okay, for sidewalk, between a road and an uncurbed walk is a 5-foot minimum buffer for a 5-foot sidewalk. Between the road and the walk curbed, which does not apply here. And then between the ditch and the walk, 2-foot minimum buffer. And then the safety barriers between the road and the walk, none is required, but you still need to comply with the buffer requirements above. Between the ditch and the walk, no safety barriers are required. And then in the case of a multi-use path, the required buffer between the road and the path is minimum 5 feet between the edge of a paved shoulder in the path. Between the ditch and the path, a safety rail is needed where the buffer width is less than 5 feet and the slope is 2 to 1 or steeper, where the drop is greater than 4 feet. And then safety barrier options between the road and the path. The barrier need not be crash-worthy or be 42 inches high, but you do have to create a visual separation between the road and the path, such as aluminum or steel railing, wood railing. Then between the ditch and the path, dense shrubbery, railing, or fencing. And all of these examples have been used at various places in Perrysburg.
Ms. Godsey, I have a question for you. I recall that this is long before I was on council, but I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, the trees were cut down and several of the residents were unhappy regarding that. There were several trees. Could trees be, to your mentioning about shrubbery, could trees be planted into that area and help soak up the water that they got into their residents' homes?
Trees could be planted, but until they were high enough and dense enough, this specifies dense shrubbery because it's a visual separation.
And you also have to be able to maintain access to that ditch for ongoing maintenance purposes.
Alice, what were you reading from? Were those requirements or recommendations, and who's the source?
These are requirements. They're listed as requirements, and they're from the Federal Highway Manual. So they're U.S. Department of Transportation.
Gotcha.
Ms. Gadsden, you had said a couple things about the buffer between the street and the path, if there's a path. I think you said it would be 5 feet buffer. Is that correct?
I believe it's a 5-foot buffer between an uncurved road and that path and/or
And you
sidewalk.
also said something about another 5 feet. I thought maybe you were referring to 5 feet tall. Could it be like what I'm envisioning is like the guardrails that I see when I'm in the national parks. They're made out of 10 by 10 treated wood. And you almost don't notice them because they blend in with the surroundings, but they're there, they serve a purpose, they divide it, they stop cars, and probably for pedestrians, because the other side of these rails is usually a cliff. But they're 2.5 feet tall, but they're made of natural materials. I don't know if that's something that would be acceptable in a setting like that.
Councilor Matuzek, this is not my knowledge. I'm reading from the consultant's knowledge, and that's kind of outside of my area.
Did I hear you say it had to be 5 feet tall?
No, it was between the road and the path, 5-foot separation, then between the path and the ditch, if it's a safety rail is needed if the buffer is less than 5 foot of width.
So it doesn't speak to the height.
Correct.
42 inches, I thought she said.
Well, it,
It doesn't have to be 42 inches.
between the road and the path, the barrier need not be crash-worthy or need not be 42 inches high.
Which that doesn't really tell us.
Right, right.
So it can be mentioned.
I can't answer your question about that, FYI. The material you use has to be approved by the federal
Highway manual.
highway because of the liabilities using certain materials or certain design methodology versus others. A good example is the new guardrail ends that are boxed compared to because of all the lawsuits that wasn't the safest. Any type of material or fencing that's been approved by the feds can be used.
This isn't a federal highway, this is.
It doesn't matter. They set the standards.
Is it just NHTSA?
And yeah, NHTSA. And for you to variate, go away from those standards, you're asking for liability because all that has been tested, and that's what they say. And each state can take that and have their own standards that are slightly stricter, and ODOT has done that. it's materials that they've tested and they know are good. That's why they're telling you have to do it this way. A good example is signs. You would think nothing of the signs, but signs have been designed up to be able to withstand certain.
Any other questions?
I guess I would
Can I
just.
read from the one? I was reading from this one for side path, and this one
They could be
sidewalk.
simple handrails.
But I was reading from this one.
I have a follow-up question. I mean, I had an 8-foot multi-use
I'm
path.
sorry, I can't hear Mr. McCarthy.
An 8-foot multi-use path, I think, would be great. But that, if I'm reading this correctly, and if I'm hearing this correctly, in some places, that would only leave a 2-foot buffer between the path and the road. And if I heard Alice correctly, you can't do that.
We've done it in some parts of the city already. If you go over the diversion diamond, but it's curved, the Fort Mix Road isn't curved, so that's where we need to get some further questions.
Okay.
Actually, if you go on Echo Junction, coming to 25 heading west, there's not even a barricade on that. It's a sidewalk right along the road with no rail.
But down on Fort Max, there's barriers up where
Yeah.
it's like right alongside the
On
road.
Fort Meigs on the east side, just past north of Echo Junction, there's sidewalk on the side that has railing on there as well. So there's spots in our city that we've done it.
Yeah,
We just need to see what can we put it up there and can we put a
and
barricade?
that's a curve, isn't it curved too?
Those are all curved, but we need to see, are we allowed to do that? Can we curb it? Can it not be curbed with a barricade? What are we allowed to do?
So you,
Needless to say, we're not taking action today.
yeah.
I think
There's a lot of questions.
We're hoping to have the answers by today and to have that, but at least I guess we can keep this in our mind here moving forward, because wherever direction we need to go, we need to help. I guess we want to keep this as a council decision versus just a committee decision, the direction to give the administration, since the council's been involved in this from the very beginning.
I would say I think I'm going to be an advocate to get that multi-use, even if it costs some extra dollars, because I think long-term investment-wise, while we're working on this ditch, if we have to work a couple of easements for choke points, things like that, I think long-term it could be worth doing. So I would probably be an advocate for that.
Financially, you're exactly right. Look at all the money the Metro Parks bring into Lucas County in a year. It's what, over $3 million alone, they estimated? So let's get some of those dollars down here.
Any other discussion? If not, any other business to come before this council?
I would like to say that I'm very sorry about the loss of his mother family.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other business? Need a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Hearing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Everyone have a very happy holiday.